Hello and welcome to another episode of Thick Slices and Deep Cuts. Today I'm going to be ranking the albums of one of my favorite bands of all time. That is Sepultura, the one and only, hailing from Brazil. I'm not going to be ranking all of their albums because they have quite a few, but I'm just going to be focusing on the era that I really enjoy from the band, and that is what I call the Cavalera years. And more specifically, the Max Cavalera years. Obviously, his brother was there during this time, and for a few albums beyond that. So, we'll be ranking the era of, I guess, about 85 to 96. And during that time, they put out 6 studio albums. So these are the 6 that I'll be ranking, are all the ones with Max as the frontman. After that, I don't know if the albums that they put out after that are good or not, because I just kind of stopped following the band at that point. But at any rate, just a classic band. I've always said that my favorite 4 bands in thrash are Slayer, Testament, Creator, and Sepultura. You can make a case that Sepultura is more, they're uncategorizable, and 2, they're almost death metal at times, and they are death metal at times. So when people call them thrash, I don't know, you can't really pigeonhole them with that label. So, but again, we're going to be ranking 6 albums and talking about a few other things beyond that. So we'll get right to it. So coming in at number 6, I've got their debut from 1986. I have Morbid Visions. In fact, not only do I have Morbid Visions, but I have their EP from 85 called Bestial Devastation. So that included on here makes for about 50 minutes of material. Here's what I'll say about this album. There is a charm to it, but it's incredibly underground and crude. I mean, you're talking about a low-budget production in Brazil from 85 and 86. I mean, it is pretty... You don't hear anything much more underground and crude than this. The guitars, so on Morbid Vision, the guitars aren't even tuned. So if you like your underground music just raw and brutal, you probably like this. But the guitars, they didn't even have time to tune the guitars. I will say this is, I know that Death's Scream Bloody Gore came out in 87, and that's a lot of times that's considered the sort of official beginning of death metal. Well, this is 85, 86, and this is pretty much just straight up extreme, dark, and evil, fast, thrashing metal. So I would just call this the death metal of its day. You got songs like, the title track Morbid Visions, Troops of Doom, which they would later re-record, Crucifixion, Empire of the Damned, Show Me the Wrath, Crucifixion. So this is all dark, that satanic thing. So this was their beginning. These were their beginnings. Also, the Bestial Devastation has this weird intro. The title track on that, Antichrist, Necromancer, Warriors of Death. So, obviously, this is a band, these guys are teenagers. If math serves me correct for Morbid Visions, that would mean that Igor's 16 and Max is 17. And I'm not sure the age of the other guys. Also, this doesn't have, this has a different second guitar player. I guess it's Gyro. This guy's on this album, or on the EP in the album. So, this is definitely the number 6. When I'm ranking these, this is definitely easily number 6. But that doesn't mean I don't enjoy listening to it, but I enjoy listening to it just for how underground and old school and crude it was. But it's definitely, content-wise, it's their darkest, most evil thing they did. And I will say that Igor, even in the very beginning, Igor is just, you can tell he's got supreme drumming talent, and he's thrashing faster than, I think Hell Awaits was out right around this time. He's thrashing faster than that. I don't know any band at this point in the game that was doing it any faster. And I'm just thinking, what are they listening to at this point? Celtic Frost or Bathory, or maybe that first Creator album. So there's not much out there at this point, but these guys have dialed in definitely the the intense, evil death metal type thing already in the mid 80s. So that's pretty impressive. Coming in at number 6, their very beginnings from 86, 85, 86 here, you've got Morbid Visions. Okay, so the rest of these 5 are all classics. And they all feature this lineup that I just think is the best. So it's tough to rank these final 5, but I was able to do it. So here we go. At number 5, I've got their 6th album, their last one with Max from 1996. I'm going with Roots. I'm ranking it 5. Doesn't mean I don't totally dig this album. I think this is an absolute classic. This is just, they're a very ambitious band. So every album they did from the beginning through, the whole time Max was there, every time they did an album, it was a step. It's always moving in a direction. In this case, Roots is ambitious. At this point, they brought in Ross Robinson to produce. Unfortunately, they have Andy Wallace mixing this because they are down-tuning to like low A, like a 7-string sound, because Ross Robinson is famous for producing a few of the albums, but certainly that first Korn album where they got the super down-tuned 7 strings, and some people call that nu metal. I don't know. It's just heavy, heavy guitars. And nu metal at this point in the game was new. It was a brand new thing. So they're still maintaining their brutal edge, but they're bringing in that nu metal element. But the good thing about the nu metal here is you've got Sepultura with super down-tuned guitars. It's still super aggressive. There's just really no... There may be thrashing on here somewhere, but it's really no thrashing. It's just brutal grooving. The title track, Roots Bloody Roots, is great. It's one of their best songs ever. Attitude is cool. Cutthroat. Breed Apart. Dusted. They also have things like Rada Mahada, which is like a... this is where they're getting in touch with their Brazilian... This is like the album of the Amazon. So they're doing a lot of tribal things here big time. Look Away is a experimental one. I forget who's on that one. I know Mike Patton of Faith No More is on, I think, that track. I know Jonathan Davis of Korn is on maybe that track as well. You've got some recordings, just some acoustic tribal recordings they did literally with tribes in the Amazon. A lot of bonus material covers. Things like that, but my thing is, usually when people say they complain that an album is too long, this one's like 72 minutes, 15 or 16 tracks. Normally I say, well, what's the problem? It's just more music to get into. But here I just feel like it is too many tracks. It is too long, and a lot of the tracks kind of sound samey. And I do think this is one of those rare instances where maybe trimming this back to like 12 songs and 55 minutes maybe. That's still a long album, but maybe trimming it back a little bit might have done a little bit more for it, because I just get lost, towards the back of this album with what the tracks are and what's going on. But I do think this is a cool album. This is the only album they did. I don't know if they actually had 7-string guitars, but the tuning they're in is low. Like they may as well have had 7 strings for this. So it's a cool album. It's the last with Max before he left. But highly ambitious album. Very cool. So at number 5, their 6th album from 1996. I've got Roots. Okay. Coming in at number 4, I really dig this album. From 1987. Got Schizophrenia. As you can see, this was their original logo, and that's the logo they have here. That's the band in '87 in the early days. This is the first album with their second album, and their first with Andreas Kisser, and this is the lineup right here that went through Roots. So they did 5 albums with this lineup, and these 5 albums are all just awesome. And Andreas brought like this. They maintain their brutal thrashing death, but they just brought like a musical quality that made the songs legit. I don't want to like classic metal. I don't new wave of British heavy metal. All I know is that the riffs become a little bit more melodic. Things are more memorable. His soloing is really good. And this album is still before they're on Roadrunner Records. So they're still on some label out of Brazil. They're still on a super low budget, but they're just such, Igor's just such a talented drummer. They've got a much meatier guitar crunch on this album, and they've got good songwriting. So this album just defies the fact that the budget for the recording is so, low on this. Although it's far better than the first album. But for me, From the Past Comes the Storms is a classic. To the Wall is a classic. Escape to the Void is about the only song on here they play live. Inquisition Symphony is this big 7-minute instrumental. It totally reminds me of their take on Metallica's Orion, or maybe the Call of Cthulhu. So it's definitely their take on that. I thought that was really cool. The back half is maybe not quite as strong as the first half, but it's still, or maybe not quite as memorable, but it's still, pretty good. You've got Streams Behind the Shadows, Septic Schizo, an acoustic thing called The Abyss, and you got Rest in Pain. My version has a re-recording of a song from Morbid Visions called Troops of Doom that they stuck on here too. So, just a very underrated, very cool album. And I do really dig this direction of the band that started here and went for at least 3 albums while they perfected sort of this style. So, coming in at number 4 from 1987, I have a very cool, fairly underrated album, Schizophrenia. Okay, here we go. Coming in at number 3, this might be a lot of people's number 2, maybe somebody's number 1, but definitely probably a number 2. For me, I have it at number 3, but I don't deny it's a classic. From 89, I've got Beneath the Remains. So this is coming after Schizophrenia. They're on Roadrunner Records now. And a producer by the name of Scott Burns, who's fairly unknown at this point. He may have done, I don't know, Death's Leprosy, maybe Terrorizer or something like that. Maybe Obituaries first, but I'm not sure. But he goes down to, this is not in Morrisound Studios in Tampa. Scott flies down to Rio de Janeiro, and they find a studio there. And but it's just a really good mix. He's a very good engineer on this, and they get a nice mix in a studio that, I don't know, it's a studio, some random studio in Rio de Janeiro, but the story has it that there was all kinds of violence and crime right outside the door. The door to the studio was literally to the main street in Rio. So it's apparently a fairly tense recording session. But what can you say? This is, classic. That classic logo is now in place. You got the Michael Whelan cool artwork there. The title track is classic. Inner Self. I think we just heard Mass Hypnosis, Stronger Than Hate, Slaves of Pain, Primitive Future. This album is maybe a little less brutal than the previous one, and a little less, not so evil as the first one. But they're really refining their sound. They're cleaning up their sound. The compositions are getting better. Everybody's getting better at their instrument. The production's getting better. Andreas Kisser is really, between Igor's incredible rhythmic drumming, Max's, good lyrics, and he's just a great frontman, and he writes, and Andreas writes, and the combination of this lineup is just perfect. So once again, you just got an album chock full of good thrash death. I think this album's heavy. It's certainly thrashingly heavy, and there are certainly moments that are heavy, but I think they're gonna kind of curtailing some of the brutality for some better songwriting here. So again, this is one of their, I think the fans might, like I said, rank this 2. For me, I've got it 3, and I'll explain why here in a moment. But an absolute classic. When I got into the band, this was one of those albums I was chewing my teeth on for a long time. This is the second thing I got. I think I got 2 of their albums. I'll get to that in a little bit, but for the longest time, this was my number 2. So coming in at number 3 from 1989, their first on Roadrunner, I've got Beneath the Remains. So coming in at number 2 for me, my opinion. I don't know what the fan base thinks of this, but I absolutely enjoy this album. From 1993, their 5th album, I've got Chaos AD. Always loved that cover. This is such an ambitious album. I really admired the band for really going for it. This is still on Roadrunner, but my copy back in the day, I guess it was distributed through Epic. So at this point, they're still on Roadrunner, but they're getting this budget, and they're really able to go for it here. And they record this one at Rockfield Studios in Wales, where all those classic bands recorded their albums. And we're listening to Amen right now from this album. I just thought the colors and the creativity, and Andy Wallace is the producer on this one. He's mixing it. He's just classic. So Andy Wallace did like Nirvana's Nevermind. He does a lot of stuff from like mainstream rock and metal to even to Sepultura. So the production on here is unique to all their other albums and very, very cool. This is what I would say the first album where they kind of veered from their usual. They've been building up. Their first 4 albums were building to something, and then this is the first time where they really go, okay, we have another ambition now. We want to go a little bit to the left. Refuse Resist is classic. Territory is awesome. Slave New World is cool. This song is great. Kiowas is just a acoustic cool thing they did in a castle in Wales. Propaganda is great. Nomad. Oh, We Who Are Not As Others is experimental and cool. Clenched Fist is maybe the only time on the final track is maybe the only time on here you're going to hear a hint of actual pure thrashing. But that's okay. I think this is just a very cool album. There are probably some death and thrash purists that just think this is sacrilege, that they veered from that. But I just think, they did 4 albums of that where they perfected it. And they wanted to do something bigger and bolder and more ambitious. And unlike, somebody like Metallica who did it, and I didn't care for it, or, this is a band going there and making it really happen. So, just a huge fan of this album. I saw them on this tour. They opened at the American Theater. It was probably 94 at this point, but they headlined. It was a great show. Clutch opened. Fear Factory was the second band, and then it was Sepultura. So coming in at number 2 for me is a classic from 93, got KSAD. And so then by process of elimination, and maybe I gave it away with this old raggedy shirt I've had since I was 16 and this poster. And this shirt I got on when I saw them on this tour from 92. From 91, I've got Arise. This may be most people's favorite. This may not really be a surprise, but to me, this is like, this album just hit me like a ton of bricks when it came out. There were milestone bands. I remember the Iron Maiden Metallica thing was a milestone for sure. Finding Slayer and Testament after that was another milestone. But finding a band like Creator and then finding a band like Sepultura, that pretty much got me into the real extreme forms of music. You're talking Scott Burns production, Morrisound Studios, Roadrunner Records, basically death metal at this point. This song is from that album. Just the pacing of the thrashing is just so high octane on this. These songs, this is what they've been building to. Morbid Visions was really super raw. Then they get Andreas in the band and they do Schizophrenia. And that's this beginning of this trajectory of just this really good death thrash. It's really well thought out, getting, I don't want to say technical, but just getting better and better. They improved upon that on Beneath the Remains, and they perfected that style on Arise, which is why I'm okay they kind of veered off on KSAD and Roots, because I think you're not going to top Arise. You're not going to put out another pure death thrash album that's going to be able to top this, so why try? Especially if you've done 3 or 4 albums like that already. Anyway, this was my introduction to the band. MTV was playing Dead Embryonic Cells and Arise. I think eventually Desperate Cry. Those are the first 3 tracks on the album. This song's called Murder. That's track number 4. Subtraction is great. I always like the atmosphere of Altered State and the atmosphere also of Under Siege. I just, again, Scott Burns is great at giving you just a little bit of atmosphere in your production, but just completely dialing in the drum sound from hell and the guitars in the mix. And that's what Morris Sound has always given, and I just love this album for that. And I've done a podcast in the past, and I think I wore this shirt in that podcast where I just went on and on about 1991 and death metal, and I'm going to consider this to be a death metal album. So, this is one of my favorite albums of my lifetime. Sepultura is one of those bands that I've never really, while I don't follow them post Max Cavalera really, there's never really been a stretch of time where I didn't reach for one of these, at least these 5 albums with that classic band. So there you go. Number 1, probably not a surprise to many, and probably not a surprise that I picked it given that this is right here and this is right here. But coming in at number 1 from 1991. Arise. So, real quick to re-rank them. Coming in at number 6, I've got their debut, Morbid Visions, which includes the Bestial Devastation EP from '85. Coming in at number 5, I've got from 1996, their final album with the classic lineup, Roots. Coming in at number 4, you've got from 1987, their first with Andreas Kisser, you've got Schizophrenia. Coming in at number 3, their third album from 1989, you've got Beneath the Remains. Coming in at number 2, I've got from 1993, their fifth album, Chaos AD, and at number 1, you've got from 1991, their fourth album, Arise. So that is ranking the 6 albums of the Cavalera years, specifically the Max Cavalera era of the band. Also of note, if you're really jonesing for all the Max Cavalera era of the band you can get, I would suggest getting Bloodrooted. This came out in '97, but it's got Celtic Frost covers, Black Sabbath cover of Symptom of the Universe, a few other covers, a few demo versions of songs from Roots like Dusted and Roots, Bloody Roots. Demos and different mixes from songs from Roots. You've got a lot of live tracks from the Chaos AD era, so you've got Refuse Resist, Slave New World Propaganda, Kiowa's Clenched Fist, Biotech is Godzilla. You also have thrown in here, you've got a semi-medley, you've got Beneath the Remains into Escape to the Void, so that's kind of cool. I always dug this one. And then last but not least, I got this a short time ago when I was at the used record store. It's called Under a Pale Gray Sky. It's live at the Brixton Academy in December of '96. It's literally the last show that Max did with the band. This is literally the last show. It's cool. It's really heavy on the Roots album, and it's a little slightly heavy on the KSAD album, so you've got a lot of the newer material. So the hardcore fans might be a little bummed. Let's see, what did they throw in that's what I would call a little old school? Troops of Doom, Beneath the Remains, Mass Hypnosis, Desperate Cry. They do Necromancer. Necromancer is a song from the Morbid Visions, from the Bestial Devastation era. So at least they throw that one in there. I always thought that was cool. Arise and Dead Embryonic Cells is on here. Inner Self. So there you go. Even a cover of Orgasmatron, which they recorded as a cover, a Motorhead cover for the Arise album. So even though it's heavy on Roots and a little heavy on KSAD, it still gives you plenty. I mean, this is a long, I count 28 songs on here, so you're getting a little bit of everything on this one. So that's always worth owning. And then last but not least, this Chaos DVD. So it contains all their videos. When I was a kid on VHS, I had this, I forget what it was called, Under Siege, live in Barcelona. It was off the Arise album. And it was so awesome. And they did just a ton of Arise and Beneath the Remains and a little bit Escape to the Void from Schizophrenia. Awesome show. For my money, that was like their peak of their cool era. Not that KSAD and Roots weren't cool, but it's a great concert video. Just see them right in their prime. But also, you've got Third World Chaos, so you've got some more videos. Every video they did from Arise and KSAD and Roots is on this thing. But you've got Third World Chaos, so you've got some live footage And then We Are What We Are. This is just basically, I think, 3 videos from the Roots album. But this is just totally cool. It's all, everything they did fits on one DVD here. So I think that's everything I have, and I think that pretty much thoroughly covers the early, that first 10 or 11 years of the band. Certainly the Max Cavalera era. If there's anything else out there that, you've got concert footage from different eras of the band. The Blood Rooted thing, the Under the Pale Gray Sky. So, just definitely a huge fan of that time period for Sepultura, Brazil's very own. So there you have it. That pretty much covers that. I think I mentioned I saw them on the KSAD. I saw them just on the Arise tour. It was in '92. But I saw them. They didn't even have a headliner. They just came in and just sold the place out. So just glad to have seen them twice in their heyday. So there you have it. That is covering the Cavalera era, the Cavalera years of Sepultura. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.